So Lance, do you want to jump in and introduce yourself to everybody?
Sure, thanks Giles. I run a company called Model Citizen. We help people really make relevant, informed and purposeful decisions with insights. We work across SME, large corporates, governments even, and really help with a range of tools and technologies around decision making. Primarily that's in Excel, but also Power BI. And we also do a little bit of automation. So I'm very passionate about looking at automation and how that is going to enhance modeling. And so we're going to actually talk a little bit about that today and some of the other technologies that are around. But this is all about cash flow and business modeling, primarily through these current times. Obviously, that's a big challenge for people grappling with understanding of what that actually means.
Yeah, and even though we promised not to mention dirty laundry, in a sense, I am going to be airing a bit of my laundry, aren't I? Because the plan is for me to share some of my models this time.
That's right, Giles. I think, what did you say? People are happy with their own laundry, but not to share it with their own underwear, but not with anyone else. So I think when you start sharing your underwear or sharing your spreadsheets with other people, it can be a bit nasty. So I think, you've got to be careful when and how you do that, and making sure that you maintain the personal hygiene, if you were, of spreadsheet modeling, which is using one of the standards, whether it be FAST or BPM. And we're actually going to cover both of those.
Yeah, well, I hope none of you think my stuff is too dirty. But anyway, moving on from dirty laundry. So we'll start off after a kind of introduction again into financial modeling. I'll go into some of the tools that I use. I'll share them all on screen. Lance is then going to pick up on a challenge. So Lance tells me he can build a 3-way financial model with actuals coming through from zero in 10 minutes. So we're going to put into that challenge, and we'll save a bit of time for Q&A at the end. And it's just the two of us. So if you have got questions, please just log it in the Q&A and we'll try and pick those questions up at the end of the session. So Lance, I'll hand over to you initially, I think, to talk about the difference between modeling and forecasting, or just a typical spreadsheet user.
Yeah, thanks, Giles. So I think, I recently created this slide, and I've shared it quite a lot, because I think what we have at the moment is this approach of way we've done forecasting. And forecasting has always been an outcome, or the what of what we're doing. And we forget the whole purpose of why we're doing it in the first place. There's very few people, very few organizations that do proper modeling. And what I mean by proper modeling is actually applying some of the modeling techniques and really going back to the drivers. So driver-based modeling, and the whole purpose of doing this really is cash flow. We often focus on profit, or we focus on EBITDA, or we focus on other aspects, but in the real sense of where it existed, where modeling first started, was actually around cash flow, discounted cash flow, valuations, corporate finance. That's the origin of financial modeling. And of course, forecasting has always had a sort of similar approach, but quite different. Now we really can't do the old methods of forecasting. We've really got to explore modeling and playing with drivers and running scenarios rapidly and building it quickly, so that we can actually make decisions quicker. Forecasting decision-making is really hard, because a lot of it is growth rate based and volume based, and it's not really driver based, which is important. So we go from the why, which is the center. Simon Sinek is, start with why. It's a great model to use in a range of things. So the why is really around cash flow and decision-making, which is why we're talking about cash flow and business modeling. The how is modeling, and we're going to cover that in the next slide. But the what is the forecast, or the model, the tangible outcome. So maybe you want to flick to the next slide, Giles, and we'll cover that in a bit more detail. So again, at the center is why we're doing this. We want to either drive performance, we want to have a valuation, we might have an IPO or a leverage buyout. We want to create or protect value. That's the whole purpose of doing it. The how of how we do those decisions, well, really, we look at financial modeling and modeling as a discipline. The first part is making sure we have a nice, clean laundry, Giles. Really, that's applying the best practice, or any standard for that matter. It doesn't have to be the best practice modeling standard. It could be FAST, could be any range of standards, but you need to follow some form of guidelines and rules around how you build your models. That's important. And then it's the 3 S's of sensitivity, scenarios, and simulations. Very few forecasts are built with that in mind around, I need to see how sensitive the business is to increases in interest rate in something like COVID-19, where there's multiple impacts in multiple different areas, where you're then talking about a scenario. And then when there's so much uncertainty, you really don't know what the assumption should be, but you know the range of what the assumption is. Then you're talking a simulation, a Monte Carlo simulation. So those are really the how of modeling. And then what you do is you go into, once you know why you're doing something, you know how to do it. Yes, Candy, you will get access to the slides. We will provide those at the end, no problem. But then you want to look at the what, the what of what we're producing at the end. And the what is really focused on this concept of a one-way cash flow model, which I think, Giles, you're going to go through, a two-way, near cash, three-way, and a four-way. So these are all really the constructs or the tangible things that obviously the things in the middle are less tangible, apart from the standards, which you could say, are written on a PDF or a Word document. The rest are less. So that's
you've got four-way in there. Is it worth just explaining what you mean by four-way for anyone that's watching?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Giles. So often what happens when you get into the deal modeling world, where you're having an IPO or project finance model, or there's the sources and uses of funds. It's something which people need to know. If I'm going to put money into this company or this project, where's the source of those funds? Those sources can be income and revenue generating, and also funding, debt, equity. So the sources of the funds are important. And then what are you going to use those funds for, and what are the uses? So it's sort of similar to the cash flow, but a slightly different lens. Of course, cash flow, you have your cash flow from operating, investing, and financing activities. And you can see within both of those, you have sources and uses. So in operating, you've got your revenue and you've got your COGS and your OPEX. In your investing, you've got, again, cash outflow, and you've got your cash inflow when you sell your investments or realize them. So sources and uses is that fourth dimension. The three-way, most people hopefully will know, although we're not running a poll now, but hopefully those that attended the previous one will now know that that's an income statement, a balance sheet, and a cash flow. So that's really important. And then the near cash, Giles, you're going to take us through an example of that, where it's more transaction level. It's not really it is a model per se, but it doesn't have this concept of, it's really focused on cash primarily. So I guess one could call it one way, but it's the difference with a one-way cash flow model, which tends to not be transaction level. I think I went through and I demonstrated that in that account text live. The key thing here is the transaction level is much more granular.
And I mean, the way we often describe that is the transaction level. That usually 13-week view we call it the tactical cash flow, because if you think of who's using that, it's often a business owner looking at very short-term, decisions about funding and whether they need to go and make some sort of a decision, versus a strategic model, a strategic forecast, which tends to be your longer term, something that's based on a set of drivers and growth rates. So that's kind of how clarity we distinguish between the two.
Yeah, near cash could be either weekly or even daily, depending on the business. But yeah, it's a much shorter time series. That's correct.
Okay. So what I'm going to do, just keeping that in mind, I'm just going to show you some modeling examples of cash flow tools that we use in the UK. And as I said, we deal a lot with SMEs and accounting firms. One of the strange paradoxes that I found, and I don't know whether you can agree with this, Lance, is the more I've learnt as a modeler over the years, the more I kind of strive for simplicity. So even though technically I'm capable of doing more, a lot of the projects we work on, our core intention is to find the simplest solution possible, and for the tool to not end up being an obstacle in itself to whatever you're trying to solve. So I'm going to start off.
I couldn't agree with you more, Giles. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. In fact, I'll give you some time to get your Excel workbooks up and running and take the slides down. I couldn't agree with you more. The thing that you realize is that more detail, more complex, isn't necessarily more accurate. And I think that's what you get to learn through experience. And I think that's one of the things that both you and I are very fortunate. We've had so much experience in building really bad models, because it's only when you build a bad model that you realize how bad it is. And you think it's really good when you build it, because it's really complex and really technical and it balances and all the rest. But in the end, someone can't use it, or it's really clunky, or it doesn't have the right time series, or so it's really thinking about the model before you actually start building it, the purpose of that. So Giles, you're going to walk us through some of your models. A question that I'll throw to you is, making really clear, why would you choose this model versus another one? What's the aim? What's the problem that we're trying to solve? Because I think that's, people will go off and just dive into their spreadsheet and just start building. And I think we lose the opportunity to have the conversation around, well, what's the purpose of the model? What are we trying to achieve? And if we don't have that conversation in the beginning, we're running a big risk of not delivering the right model for the right decision.
Yeah, perfect. So that sets me up perfectly. The first model I'm showing on screen now is almost a one-page wonder. It's so yellow fill cells are inputs, and what you'll see there is a group of rows where you can manually input for 13 weeks your cash inflows, and a group of rows where you manually input your cash outflows. Now, for anybody that's watching that has seen anything to do with project finance or infrastructure modeling, clearly this is of no value to a project finance deal. But we do a lot of work with business owners, with entrepreneurs. And for a lot of those businesses, they've never had a single cash flow forecast that they understand, that they kind of had full involvement in the assumptions and the drivers, and that they can start to make key decisions based off of. And this is genuinely what we turn to first in a lot of IFD work. The client gets a blank version of this, and we say, right, you go and type in every single number for your cash flow forecast for the next 13 weeks. And they have to think very, very carefully about every number that they put in there. And this model will just produce a nice summary for them. So you get a dotted line for your net cash. You can see very clearly if your net cash turns negative over those 13 weeks. And that's just the first step. So when we look at some of the stuff Lance goes into on Monte Carlo, obviously in our heads, to have everybody doing Monte Carlo analysis would be amazing. But for a lot of business owners or people that aren't that comfortable with Excel, you can't expect them to go from where they are to that really technical end of modeling. So this is a baby step. They fill out this spreadsheet. If they want to run a scenario, essentially they just have to change the numbers. But what they get at the end of this is a view of the future that they can start to think about their strategic decisions based off the back of. So the other thing that I just want to point out is I'm a fast modeler, so I follow the fast standard, and you'll start to see as I go through these models some consistency. We've got some orange tabs, which are my control sheets. They give you background information, or they hold the internal checks. The yellow tab is my inputs tab, and the green tab is my outputs tab of some sort. So this is free on Eloquence, by the way. You're all free to download this from our page. The next level up then, now we're getting into this sort of transactional, slightly more scientific and hopefully slightly more accurate forecasting approach. So this is again a 13-week cash flow forecast tool. You can actually have up to 52 weeks of forecasting data in here. I'm on the dashboard at the moment. So based on the numbers that you plug in, you get a really nice waterfall of your cash flow movements from opening to closing balance with all the inflows and outflows. You've got that net cash line again over the 13 weeks, so you can see very clearly if it turns negative. You've got some sensitivity factors up here, so you can play with debtor days, creditor days. But there's two separate drivers for this model, and one is linked to zero through data dear. And essentially what you can do is you can pull down the breakdown of your debtors and your creditors balance by individual entry. So you've got individual line items for balances on your debtors here, and you can make individual predictions about the timing in days that you think it will be until you receive that cash. Well, the same for the creditors. You've got a breakdown of the creditors balance, and you can make individual predictions about when you think you're going to pay out that cash. So that's quite a kind of technical and quite a specific way of forecasting something driven from your balance sheet. You're not doing high-level hard-coded forecasts now. But on top of that,
so Giles,
yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, just quickly on data dear. So you've got a tab, you've got a ribbon at the top there that says data dear, and I guess maybe once you've got this, you could pretty much use the same file for any client. Is that right? It's scalable. Absolutely. Across multiple clients.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So data dear, we touched on a little bit in the summit, but it's an add-in to Excel. So you have to purchase a license. Once you've got that add-in, this is essentially the single report that we bring down for this model. All of the invoice data going back however many years. If you want to refresh this report, so if you come back to this model a week later, you just click on this, click current sheet, quick refresh, and all of the latest data will come down from 0 for you. So you don't have to do any manual importing of data. You press refresh in Excel and that'll update your dashboard with all of the latest data. On top of that, in this model, you can also then do a separate and sort of overlaying 13-week forecast. So here you've got some forecast sales, whether it's subject to VAT or not. So that, if you think of, when I say sales, I mean a P&L starting point, and then you'll be driving the cash from the debtor days assumption. You've got some forecast purchases and a breakdown of some other costs for things like financing costs, payroll. All of that pulls together basically into this dashboard. So you can see the breakdown of your cash from the debtors, from the new sales. You can see the breakdown of your outflows into whatever it is, from creditors, new purchases, payroll. So this is our next level up. This is for a client where they've already got a pretty good initial understanding of what their forecast of cash flow could be, but now they need to be quite scientific. And if you think of what we're going through with Corona at the moment, we use this again quite a lot because it's so helpful for clients to be able to bring through their latest debtors and creditors balance and update these assumptions about when they think they will or won't receive the cash. Just stepping back again in terms of fast modeling, control sheets at the front. Okay, this is an example of our internal controls tab that we always have. So if there's ever an issue with the integrity of the model, then something will flag up here. Output sheets in green and the inputs are in yellow again. And then we move on to the far more comprehensive model that we've got. So this is a 3-statement model. So on here, you've got P&L balance sheet cash flow. It's an indirect cash flow. You've got the same sort of graphical page that we try and just give you the highlights of the most important information over time. So again, that net cash balance you can see straight away, and it's turning negative at some point, and you can see that there's some debt coming in to cover that. But now this is actually quite heavily driven by drivers. So Lance, this is an example of me breaking the rules slightly, which I'll show you and I might get shut down for. This is a model that I'm still finalizing, but I've built it specifically for Corona. You've got 12 months of monthly forecasts. So if you look here, you're forecasting your revenue by month for a year. And then beyond that, you're forecasting annual growth drivers. Now, if anyone from F1, F9 was watching this, they'd probably slap my wrist because you should never really have monthly drivers and then annual drivers on the same row. The only reason I've done it is because I'm thinking of the user in my mind, and I'm prioritizing the user and the fact that I think they'd like to see that all in one place. The other option is you could probably
absolutely, yeah. I think that's important, Giles. I mean, I also do some things that are not strictly in adherence to the best practice modeling standard, but But I think if you're doing it in the context of the user, then that's probably an acceptable thing to do, because ultimately that's who you're serving, that's who's hiring you, and they're going to get value out of it. And if they have to jump between 3 different tabs to find out different rates, and it's not all in one, then that can be a challenge. Neil, we'll come back to your question on data deer at the end, and any other questions around data deer and pricing and any of the other tools. But yeah, no, that's great, Giles.
So I'm not going to, deep dive into this model because there's a lot here. But again, from a modeling approach position, I'm trying to show you the consistency where, again, I've got all of my control tabs at the front here, and in particular my control sheet. If you look at the number of internal checks that we've got going on, performance checks, integrity checks, this is a vital component of any model that we build, and I'm sure it is for you as well, Lance.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think if you don't have a model with checks, and literally every single spreadsheet that I pick up from my clients fails to have a check sheet. I was like, where's the check sheet? Oh, we don't have one. Well, how do you know there's errors? Oh, well, we don't. We think there are errors. Well, I guarantee there will be. If you don't have a check sheet, you don't know. Absolutely. And the chances are, as we've always said, 90% of spreadsheets have errors. So you've really got to put that in. And it's one thing that, and not just the one thing, I think there's quite a few things that are very consistent between fast and best practice, and rightly so. And checks is one of it. You absolutely have to have integrity checks throughout the model. One of the biggest checks, particularly for a 3-statement model, is the balance sheet balance check. And I think that's one thing that is critical. Sorry, did I steal your thunder there?
No, not at all. You just timed it perfectly again. So I was going to say one of the core checks we've got is that the balance sheet balances. So as you're building out your 3 statements, you always try and get the balance sheet balancing straight away. So you link in your retained earnings and your cash flow, and you build out your balance sheet block by block if you're doing it manually, which we'll come on to later. And that's an absolutely crucial check that your balance sheet balances. Gives me the confidence now that when I look at that cash flow, okay, there might be some areas where I could allocate movements to different buckets, but at least I know that overall that cash flow movement is correct.
Yep.
Okay, so again, just going back to the high level view of all of our models, inputs grouped together, calculations grouped together. I'm really OCD about the way that my calculations look, which again is breaking fast a little bit, but it doesn't matter where you go, I try and keep everything neat. Some people might break this out into different tabs. I tend to keep things together wherever I can. And then all of my output tabs in green. So that's probably as much as I want to show in terms of the details of the model, but hopefully you get a sense from what we do. I don't really use much in the way of automation other than I have a catalog of models and templates that I've built over 10 plus years. So if I need to bring something in that does, revenue in a certain way, then I'm very rarely am I starting something from scratch.
Yeah, I mean, Giles, I'll challenge you on that because you're using data deer, and data deer is a form of automation. So yeah, I think it depends on how you define automation. I think there's lots of areas of improvement that we can look at around Excel management and spreadsheets, not just on the build. But I think absolutely there's automation in checking, there's automation in data collection. And of course, Excel itself has got enhancements to the way that they automate. Power Query is a huge automation tool. But a Power Query, going in to grab data through an API is not that straightforward. So using a tool like DataDeer or Medano, which has connectivity through an API to the accounting system, is certainly useful. Alrighty, what's this, Giles? You're trying to put everyone to sleep with books.
Spreadsheets to books. So the final message I had really was to go back to this idea that I mentioned earlier, that as I've gained more experience and exposure to modeling and done things probably incorrectly or in a not very efficient way over the years, for anybody that's interested in modeling that's watching this, I want you to start to think of what you do as though you're building a toolkit of things that you can do. And that can be actually technical modeling in terms of logical functions or whatever, but actually mindset as well and how you approach every project and challenge. And the reason why I've got this up is I want you to imagine that you're sat at a desk with a bookshelf of skills that you've built up over time. And any project you come to, it's like you're leaning back over and picking individual elements of what you know for a particular project. So you're never going to have to use everything that you know on a project. But as I said, with some of our small business owners, we might just turn to a single tool from everything we've got where they have to hard code numbers. And actually, as a first step for what we deliver to them, that's enough.
Absolutely. There's a great, just on the chat, Rod says, love the Modesty Guides, road to progress is paved with so many mistakes. Absolutely. I could not. And you know what, the thing with Excel is everyone's made a mistake. Everyone's made small mistakes and we've all made big mistakes. And that's the way you learn in Excel. You learn by finding the mistake, preventing it the next time. So, you know, making sure, I mean, I built was meant to build a three-way model. I thought I'd leave the balance sheet to the end. I did everything else. And I spent 10 hours just trying to balance the balance sheet. That was such a bad mistake. Never start a three-statement model build without your balance sheet straight away. So I think, you know, these are the things that you learn through making some bad mistakes. And, you know, the moment the balance sheet goes out, have an error check, have a flag. You know that you've made a mistake, so you can unpick it. You can unpick one or two steps. Unpicking an entire build is very, very difficult.
And you are, I suppose the message is as well, you are going to make mistakes. There's no way you are going to build a model and not make a mistake. So that the trick is to find it and find it before anybody relies on the numbers.
Find it before anyone else does.
Exactly. Great. So that's, I'll hand over to you there, Lance, because I know you're going to now go further into three-way modeling from your side. Is it worth just recapping what we mean by those 3 S's for everybody watching again?
Yeah, so it's really the 3 threes, right? It's the three-way model, the 3 statements, your income statement, balance sheet, cash flow. But that of itself is useful, but without the 3 S's being sensitivities, scenarios, and simulations, you're really just stuck with a static set of numbers. So, you know, to be a true model, you really have to have scenarios, which are multiple sensitivities at the same time. Sensitivity is just one variable. So interest rate is a great example of an interest rate sensitivity. What happens if interest rates change? What happens if the oil price changes? We've all seen people are not driving their cars during COVID-19. The oil price and gas and fuel has plummeted. You know, what impact will that have on businesses? Quite substantially in the positive. Unfortunately, things aren't in isolation. So we might have a drop in fuel costs, but we've got, you know, no rent or we've got other aspects. So we need to consider scenarios. And then simulations is just scenarios and steroids. It's sort of multiple scenarios happening at the same time, calculating with a random generation of those assumptions between a range. So we use ran between. There's many other ways. In fact, you can even do it with dynamic arrays, which I think, you know, we're going to be covering more of that in our other workshops that are coming up down the track. Great. So okay. Excel, I guess, Giles, you started off talking a little bit about data. I mean, there's a number of different tools and technologies out there. I mean, of course, Excel is a great tool in itself, but there are areas where we can make improvements in the way that we use it, because we have to connect it to other systems and do other fancy things, including visualizing models differently with two-way visualization. And of course, you know, Power BI is another aspect, but ultimately, you know, all of these tools are really going to help us improve and save time and really make it more efficient and hopefully less errors. You can never get rid of the errors, but certainly you can make less errors if you're using some of these tools.
So Lance, just to jump in there, this is really interesting for me because I've always been a pretty clear Excel geek, and I'm snapping myself out of that as much as I can at the moment. But you're you know, very much in that automation kind of area of adding on to Excel where possible. And I know you're a Medano fan. We were on a session a week or so ago with Kenny from Gridlines, where he built a project finance model in 20 minutes. And I think your challenge for this session is you're going to build a three-way model in half that time. So I feel like a dinosaur, to be honest, with my Excel only approach now. I'm slightly worried that you know, it's just moving so fast, isn't it? If we can start to build full models in even 20 minutes, I thought was incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that this is where, Medano has actually been around for a number of years. Gridlines has only recently come into public domain. So the area of modular spreadsheet development is really quite exciting. I actually see it as a great enabler as opposed to a threat, because we can spend more time, and Kenny made a great point of, spend more time where there's value. Actually use it in a way that is more beneficial to the end user. Building it is useful, but the value is in the decision. The value is in analyzing and using the model. So let's change the amount of time we spend building and focus more on the outcomes. And I think that's the key part of why I've used these technologies, because I think whilst building is difficult and important to do it correctly, if we can automate it, why shouldn't we? So Giles, you might have to pass the screen share back to me so I can share my Excel workbook. So,
yeah.
The key thing here is really to understand how these technologies can really help us, to sort of supercharge the way we build models. And like you, I have my data deer add in, and I've got a few others. So it's certainly something that we're both, you're still starting your journey, but you've also got other add-ins as well. But there's no question that ultimately the world of automation is hitting thick and fast. And for those that didn't think that financial modeling could get automated, well, now there's 2 software packages that are out that do this, but Medano obviously has a slight lead. So Giles, I'm going to grab my stopwatch here and put it on the screen. You're gonna check to make sure that I'm not cheating.
Absolutely.
As well. And then what I'm also going to do is really just show that this is actually a blank workbook. I'm not hiding any sheets. There's nothing hidden. I'm not just suddenly going to pop up and unhide a whole bunch of sheets and that's going to happen. So I'm going to start now. And so what we're going to do is we're going to build a full 3-way model. Step 1. We're then going to connect it to Xero. We're then going to have the chart of accounts mapped for the income statement and balance sheet, and with dashboards and all of that in hopefully under 10 minutes. So here goes.
Okay.
So using the Medano ribbon, I'm also going to talk while I'm doing it, just so that I'm not just doing shortcut keys. So we're going to use a financial model wizard, which sits within Medano. It makes it really easy to understand and build. So in this financial, can you see that pop-up window? Giles, sorry.
Yeah, it's coming. Yeah.
So I'm going to choose, there's different chart of account structures, which you can see here, but really I'm going to make it easier for myself. Chart of account structure 1. We can choose multiple currencies and multiple locations, but again, sorry for you, I'm Australian. I'm going to build this in Australia. Also, I'm using Xero, the demo client, which is obviously Australian. And then we can choose GST or other aspects. So I'm going to click next, which then gives me some options around the time series. And so I've looked at the demo client in terms of the time periods that exist for it, and making sure that I'm picking up the initial periods. This is a 36-month model, so it's 3 years. We have these periods of actuals, and it's a rolling model, so there's a rolling forecast. So we're going to build this, but once it's built, we're going to be able to roll it and update it as quickly, in fact, quicker than what I have done building it. So we're going to then click next. So what it's going to do, it's going to grab all the different modular blocks that make up this 3-year model, which are scalable. So you can pull in and pull out, and it's going to pull those together. Now, typically when I build this for clients, we don't connect it live. I'm on a bit of time pressure. I'm going to go straight into Xero and pull in the data. QuickBooks as well, but Excel or CSV, I can pull from any system. I can pull from Pastel or Hyperion or SAP or Oracle. really any Excel or CSV dump. It'll work with any accounting system. It's accounting system agnostic. Let's click next. It's then going to take me to my web browser for Xero. So let's go there. So I'm going to connect to Xero. Sorry, this is something at my other screen. I've got to make sure I'm connecting to the right client. I'd hate to connect to a real client. So we're just doing it here. I'm allowing access. It's taken me back to Medano. It's now connected. The connection is now verified through an API. So it's awaiting authorization, and now it's collecting the 4 periods for the income statement, period 1, 2, 3, 4, and the balance sheet 1, 2, 3, 4. So now it's grabbed, and this is the results. It's also got a reconciliation at the bottom. So this is the target, and this is the actual that's sitting in the model. If I click to the left and the right, I can see each of the periods. If I unmap the revenue, we can see that all of these other orange bits are mapped, but the sales is not mapped, which is why there's a difference at the bottom. I literally can take this, drag and drop, or I can use these arrows to link and unlink. I'm then going to go next. This is now the balance sheet. Now the balance sheet is also mapped. Again, I can go left and right, and I can check that if there's a new chart of account that comes in, it'll appear as a difference as it does here. Then I'm going to click next. This is a dashboard that gets pre-populated. It's the financial statement summary. It's got a cascade. It's got a range of pretty dashboards that are built in Excel that effectively you can change. And then I'm going to click the create button. Now this is the magic, right? It's building it in the background, and in the foreground, you can see the project manager building all the modular blocks. So remember we spoke about those error checks? Absolutely, they're critical. So the error checks, which is your balance sheet checks or your div errors, and all of that gets picked up. Your alerts like negative cash, and sensitivity checks. If you're running a sensitivity, you want to make sure that that's been flagged. So let's just have a look quickly. Time check, we're at 4 minutes 30. I'm not even breaking a sweat yet, Giles. I don't know about you, but 20 out of 20 modules. What's that?
I said, I am watching you.
Well, I think people are sweating because it's just game changing how quickly. That's wizard level. Thanks, Matthew. It is. The thing is that, obviously building it is only one part. It's then the customization. So being able to customize and share all of that. 72% complete.
So Lance, just a quick question for you. So typically then when you build this for a new project, you must have to tailor every model a bit, surely. That there can't be many where you literally just do it off of Medano and that's it. Would that be right?
Absolutely. So Matt makes the comment, thanks for putting me out of work, guys. Yes. That's not the point.
That's what I'm thinking.
The point is actually not to put you out of work. The point is to never have to model depreciation ever again. Never have to model working capital ever again. What you're doing is you're actually focusing on the outputs. So this model is now built. I've stopped the clock at 5:11. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you a couple of extra bits post that. So really, if you look at the summary dashboard, which has already been built, now there's an error in this. So I want to find out where are the error checks. I can click here. This is my list, like your control sheet. There's error checks. Sometimes there's negative, positive numbers which are negative. That's why there's an alert in this one. So it's not an error. It's just, you need to go have a look. But this summary actually is an error. So let's go and click that. And so we have an error in the period. This error is actually as a result of this model only starts in February. And of course, it's going back before that. So the way we clear this error is actually just to change the time period. So I'm just going to quickly scroll up here. I'm going to change this drop down to the first model period, and that error is gone. So now the start of this model, that's the actuals that are coming through, flowing through from Xero. That's the full balance sheet flowing through, and of course the cash flow. Well, now, interestingly enough, I've only imported a balance sheet and a P&L, and the cash flow has been recalculated. It actually backworks the cash flow for you. So if you actually don't even have a cash flow, how long it takes to even prepare a cash flow manually. Over the right-hand side, we have some of the key dashboards pre-populated. Top revenue, of course, we can see our revenue, top expenses, and we can start seeing our profitability, revenue, expense. All of this has been built already. There's nothing else to be done. We have our cash flow similar to what you had in terms of showing your net cash movement. And then this is sort of a vertical cascade, which is showing opening cash, closing cash, and all the movements in between. So, this is absolutely powerful stuff. And the reason it is because there's a project management layer that sits at the top. These are all modular blocks. We see how all of these are connected in links. And ultimately, these are built through different modules and module areas. But why three-way modeling is hard and why people like Matthew feel threatened, because it takes so long to build this. And I'm going to show you a visual of how complex a three-way model is. That's it, right? Each of these links you've got to build manually. And that's the thing that Medano does for you automatically. It's just really organizes your data, organizes your logic so that you can just do the customization. So when we build models for clients, 80% of it is done. We're tweaking the last 20%. And that's where we spend most of the time, understanding their strategy, their business, playing with scenarios. That's the key. That's the key value of modeling, not the build. You can't do the other stuff without building a model, but that's, you've got to get there quicker.
So there's a question in for you, Lance. How easy is this to update? And also for things like making things look prettier, which I totally get, Neil. As in, tabs.
Ultimately, you're still within the Excel environment. If I want to update this model, so this is up to May 20. Let's go and grab another time period. I'm going to go to my time series. I'm going to change May to June. So we're going to update and we're going to roll this model. We're going to click update. Hey, presto, it's rolled because look at that. I've got an extra column for June. So now that's going to go in. I'm going to repeat that process, go Medano, import assumptions. I'm going to go back into Xero and pull that data in as I just did before. That's updated everything in this model. So if I go to the summary at the top, what you'll see here is the June has now got an H in it for history. F is for forecast. And if I go back and I put in a number here, let's go put in 10,000 as the actual, that's going to flow through straight away to that dashboard. So there's the 10,000. It also flows through to the full income statement in the financials, which is here, the 10,000. So Giles, this is really critical in terms of, being able to automate. If I want to go customize and change something, this is sales. So let's go put in sales 5,000 for the future. But now we want to switch out this sales. It's not amounts. Let's replace sales with growth rates. So let's go to the web. Let's swap out revenue. So now I'm going to go into the library, the Medano library, and I'm going to swap out just the revenue module. So this is the power of modular spreadsheet development, where you can pull out this particular module and swap it for something else. So let's go and do that. Of course, the values that I've just put in are going to get removed. So let's choose growth rates here. We've got a whole range of other different types of logic. Of course, we can still customize and change it within it once you know how to use within the Medano environment. We're going to click and change that to growth rates. And what I'm going to do is that'll then change to percentages, and we'll be able to do that.
That's amazing.
But I think we should probably move on, Giles, because we're going to run out of time soon. We want to cover off the rest of.
Yeah, so amazingly, and we didn't plant that question, somebody said, how can they learn this? Are there any more workshops? Can we sign up somewhere? So probably leads us quite nicely into the rest of our slides.
So look, there's the 5% growth rate that's in, but I'm going to stop sharing and you can take over the slides and go from there.
Okay, bear with me. Okay.
Right. So, we're doing this not just to, we don't own these tools. We play with them. I'm really agnostic. I choose the right tool because of what it does, and it does the right things. And for me, it's about saving time, saving money, and reducing errors. That's it. If a tool doesn't do one of those three things, it's really not helping me make better decisions, because that's where the value is. So, yes, we used to build models manually, or sorry, I did when I was in corporate, and I did it as an investment banker. But now I'm running a business, and I want to do this at speed, and I want to do this at scale, and I don't really want to have it being done manually. I also want my team to work together and collaborate, which absolutely you can do. So that's the important thing about improved decision making, and I think that's what we're going to be covering in our workshops coming up, Giles, which people can definitely sign up to. So the key thing that these workshops are going to cover, we're going to start from the beginning. Before we go into the Madonna wizardry, we're really going to start first up with mindset, Excel. These are going to be on screen with you and I, walking through best practice and standards and formulas and navigation and tables and pivot tables and dashboards and open questions as well, where people can be live with us. We've obviously got doing it over 2 half days. And then there's some homework, because I think really you don't learn this stuff without actually getting your hands dirty. Both you and I have been doing this as, as full-time careers and as businesses. So we get to do it every day, whereas most people don't. So I think in order for us to sort of grow, we need to sort of apply it and do it on a more hands-on basis, which is effectively what we're going to do in track 1. On track 2 is we're going to take it to that next level. So once we've built the basics, we're going to recap the basic principles. But we're going to have an assumed knowledge. So for those who wanted to just join track 2 and be more advanced and look at the tech and the tools, and we're going to then introduce Monte Carlo simulation. We're then going to introduce our Excel toolkit. We're going to look at Madonna in a bit more detail. We're going to look at Modeler. We're going to look at Excel Analyzer, which is an Excel error detection. We're going to look at more advanced Excel functions like dynamic arrays, and showing how that's connected to Power BI, and of course, more open questions, and of course, some homework. So ultimately, this is about getting really practical with 2 people that do this full time, that we really want to help people gain from this. So it's real application, yes, applying technology, but the right technology. It's going to be live, exactly like we are now, but there's going to be a smaller group, so we can't open it up to everyone. Real experiences, real application. There'll be a certificate of completion, and ultimately we want to build a community around this. So for those that join and sign up for the workshops, we're going to have a Slack instance, which you've already got set up, Giles, for people to come and collaborate and join. And that's where we're going to share some more information, and people can definitely get so much value out of this. We're going to give these models away as part of this training. I mean, £2,500 worth of modeling, 16 hours of training across both workshops. You're giving away a bucket load of fast models and your own models. We're giving away a truckload as well, including a dynamic array model that's connected to Power BI. We're giving away a one-way cash flow model, but we're not just giving it away. We're actually going to go through the models and help people use and apply and benefit from it. And it's the application. So the key thing is 5 Excel models from you, 6 from us. There's going to be a bit of overlap between the 2 tracks. So you might actually end up with more than just 11. But I think this is exceptional value for what we're going to be providing to everyone.
Yeah, and I think the main thing that we've talked about, Lance, is, I mentioned this journey of gaining experience, and we're seeing this as like a testosterone shot in the arm for modelers, that you can literally leapfrog, years of that experience, we hope, with all of these tools that we've built over years of experience. So and the fact that we're limiting it, so we'll come on to the limit in a minute, it's 45 people. We want it to be a little community. I mean, one of the things I said, Lance, was I wish I'd had 44 other people who were of the same mindset as me when I started this, but I didn't know anyone else that was as geeky at spreadsheets as I was. So we're trying to build a really nice community where you can share challenges and ideas going forwards.
Yeah, absolutely, Giles. And I think, we are limited because we do want a fairly close group. Track 1, 45 people, track 2, 45. We're doing it on the weekend because to be honest, Giles, what's a weekend these days, right? During the weeks, it feels like weekends, So we want people to have time out of the work pressures. And you know, it's 4 hours on a Saturday, 4 hours on a Sunday, Australia 5 p.m., UK 9 a.m. You know, both you and I are going to be live with everyone. There's a bundle. It's £450 for both tracks, or 300 for individual tracks, plus VAT, of course. And so 8 hours live plus support, and of course both post those sessions is going to be ongoing work. So the basic knowledge requirements, Candy, really for track one, literally if you've used Excel for the first time, hopefully you've got a bit more knowledge, you know, in terms of using the basics of Excel, but we're going to take everyone from really basic knowledge in track one. So track one, we're going to start with none of the fancy tools and the wizardry. We're literally going to focus on the fundamentals of building an Excel workbook, formulas, tips and tricks. The standards are critical. And I think, you know, a shout out to Gridlines as well around their training, and which is available for free. If you want something that's purely focused on some of the standards, that's good, but there's no interaction. That's an online training. It's great for practice. What you're going to get here is practical experience. We're going to give you workbooks. You're going to get feedback. It's live, it's interactive, and of course you're going to get a whole range of models, not just the ones that you're working on.
And just to be clear, that's
basic knowledge requirement. You need to know how to use Excel.
It's 8 hours per track, so it's 16 hours for both altogether. It'll be across 2 different weekends, so 4 hours on a Saturday morning for me, 4 hours on a Sunday morning, and then that same structure again on another weekend for the track 2.
That's right. So yes, that we will share the slides. We're going to share this recording. It is recorded. And I just want to flip back to some of the other questions around the error checks. You know, really how you build error checks is with links, you know, in terms of that. But here's a great link, right? This is a great link to Eventbrite. So if you are wanting to jump on, make sure that, you know, there's only 45 places for each track. There is, Neil, we're going to cover Data Deer Medano in terms of costings, absolutely. We can certainly, as part of this package, there are a range of bundles that we're throwing in around each of those products. So we'll provide you more information on that, including extended free periods. So I think Data Deer specifically have offered a free trial period, 90 days. Modeler's got 90 days. And there's a few others that have offered extended periods and also discounts on pricing. So Medano, there's some discounted pricing for those that attend the workshop. And whilst it's not free in terms of training, you will see some of that. I think they've got a 7-day free period, but of course, you know, there'll be discounts on the pricing. Bundle package 450. There's links. The slides will be up and available. We're going to put this also on LinkedIn. So make sure you get in quick. If you sign up through the EOI, you'll get an email soon, hopefully sometime later this evening or your day in the UK. And ultimately we'll give priority to those that have come live. But we will be sharing it, you know, with the community on socials pretty soon. Can we post the link here? Sure. Let's, Giles, can you?
I can probably do that. I'll tell you what, I'll stop sharing my screen for the moment and let me see if I can do that in the background.
Yep. Great. In the meantime, I'll have a look at any other questions. So I'm just scrolling back up. Access to the slides. Yes. Data Deer pricing. Neil, I think we answered that one. But it does get priced based on per entity basis. So it depends on the discounts, but it is being offered 90 days for free. So 90 days for free, you can trial it. And if you find value, of course, then decide after. More insights developing checks. Yeah, checks are flags. You can use, you know, if statements, and, you know, if there's a flag, or if the check is broken, like if the balance sheet doesn't balance, then, you know, you'd put in a 1. So it's just a if statement. And then of course you use conditional formatting to pick that up. And of course that gets flagged elsewhere in the model or centralized ideally. struggle for time. I think they've jumped off. Excel Analyzer. Yes, Excel Analyzer as well is going to have I think a 70, 60 or 70-day free trial with Excel Analyzer, which is error detection,
yeah.
And error reporting. Modeling in public. Well done. Thanks, Candy. I've done it a few times, so I'm used to it. But it is still nerve-wracking, even though I've done it many times. Modeling live is tricky. Thanks, Neil. Wizard level, indeed, Matthew. But it's also the technology. I can't take all the credit. Wizardry, that's great. Any other questions? I think we've pretty much done. Lance, would you know which language is behind Medano? I think it's a combination of VBA and .NET. But yeah, I'm sure you can reach out to the Medano guys and they can give you more detail, but there is aspects of that. Can Power Query do what Data Deer can? Rod, I don't believe it can, because you need a REST API and you need to authenticate. So I don't think you have that in Power Query. Power Query grabs information and scrapes it. You need to then authenticate and pull that down. Have you ever explored that, Giles, at all?
No, well, I mean, only in the sense that I suppose you can export data and save it to a folder and pick it up with Power Query, but no, not to the same level that Data Deer does, as far as I'm aware.
Yep. So there's a question there, LB London. No, we're actually going to have the sessions together. Giles and I are going to be alive at the same time, same place, which is online, not same places in London and UK, but I'm going to be in Melbourne. Giles is in London, and we're going to do Saturday morning in the UK, Saturday afternoon or late afternoon. So this is we're going to do it together. We want to build a community, and you get different perspectives from both of us. So I think the link, Candy, should be there. We've answered that. Lydia, thanks. Very informative session. Amazing models. Thanks, Lydia. Thanks, guys. Going to jump into another call. All good. I think we're pretty much done, Giles. We're hit the 7 o'clock mark. Wow, that was. I was worried. I thought we were going to go. We got stuck in the beginning with your dirty laundry there. So I thought it was a really a tricky one. So thanks everyone. Thanks for jumping on. Have a great day or have a great night if you're in Melbourne or Australia. And I think that's a wrap.
That's it. Thanks, guys. Take care. Speak to you soon, hopefully. Find us on LinkedIn if you haven't connected already.